Alright guys, later tonight I will be playing Star Fox Zero on stream. So if you're interested in seeing this absolute gem, this masterpiece in action, please tune in because this is the Zero project. Okay, this is something that's been in the making for 10 years. You know, one of my goals as a content creator, one of my goals as a human being, get the general population to accept that Star Fox Zero is a masterpiece. One of the best games ever made, the best game on Wii U, a huge, stellar foot forward for the franchise, and the true return of the franchise's comeback. Because this is something that people who were surprised by Fox being in the Mario movie don't understand, you know. Star Fox came back with Zero, you know, not with the upcoming Switch 2 game, not with Starlink, not with Star Fox 2 on Super Nintendo, Star Fox Zero. This was the first time we had seen the character in a non-Smash Bros. Role in years. And this is the game that established the template for what the series is going to be in the future, right? Star Fox Zero was a masterpiece with incredible air combat, with just like great spaceship controls, with like a ton of content, a ton of challenge, and an amazing final confrontation with Andross, right? Star Fox Zero is phenomenal. A huge improvement over Star Fox 64, but because of just how so many people just wrote the game off and tried to say it was lame or derivative for being a rail shooter, these guys didn't know what they were talking about. And hopefully, with the release of with the Star Fox movie coming out, with kids getting into 64, hopefully we can kind of move past this notion that Zero was bad and disappointing and kind of accept it as one of the best games ever made. You know, the true return to Star Fox. So again, let's like, you know, outline this for a bit. So Star Fox Zero comes out in 2016. You know, it launches alongside Star Fox Guard, right? Two major Star Fox experiences, right? And then we get like Starlink and Star Fox 2 on the Super Nintendo Classic and on Switch. And now we've gotten Fox in the Mario movie, okay? So again, this has been something that a lot of people have said about the Mario Galaxy appearance, is that like, oh yeah, kids don't recognize Fox, like there hasn't been a Star Fox game in like the past 30 years, right? This isn't something that people would recognize, but like that just isn't true. Like, obviously not. Do you think kids aren't playing Star Fox 64? You know, one of the most popular games on Nintendo Classics. Do you think they're not playing Super Smash Bros., where, like, Fox has always been this beloved character? Do you think they're not familiar with the locations, the music, right? Like, it's just like, no, of course not. Like, Star Fox has stayed very, very relevant over the past decade since Zero came out. You know, and now, because of the Galaxy appearance, like, all that's happened is that all the bluster has been swept aside, and people are allowed to be, like, enthusiastic about this character again. Because what happened when Zero came out was that the industry ran severe damage control to try and downplay this brand. To try and say that it doesn't matter, that nobody likes these games, that the Star Fox formula is outdated, that the controls don't work. You know, they threw out all the stops to try and get you to believe that this game is bad, okay? You know, I remember when the game was first shown off at E3 2015, and, you know, everybody tried to say it looked bad, that the controls didn't work, that, like, it was a huge disappointment. And the simple fact of the matter is that was very obviously not true. Okay, you know, I knew people like, say, Player Essence, who went to E3 and tried to tell people that game journals were completely accurate about the controls. But as we know now, game journals can't be relied on for anything. But back then, we had to wait for the game to actually come out on April 22nd, 2016, in order to get our hands on the game itself, play the controls, and then get a hold of it and like get the hang of it and like before the tutorial was over. Okay, the controls were not difficult to use. They were not challenging. They were not cumbersome. They were not obtuse. Like, game journals were just bad at the game. But because they had spent the whole year like damage controlling it and downplaying it, and because people still took people like Jim Sterling like word as gospel, you know, they actually listened to him before he became a woman. You know, this game's reputation was trashed before it actually came out. And that led to this weird kind of like, you know, the past decade where a lot of influencers who hedged their entire careers on hating Star Fox Zero and like pushing the meme that it was like some huge disappointment and like the absolute worst of the Wii U era, like they continued this farce for a decade. I believe every major Nintendo YouTuber from that period, Player Essence, Scott the Woz, several others, released videos like saying this was like the worst thing ever, and it just isn't. Like, not only is it quite a sight better than Adventures, Command, and especially the overglazed and overhyped Assault, like, this is, in a lot of ways, quite a bit better than Star Fox 64, because Star Fox Zero actually managed to grow and evolve the formula. You know, the unique control scheme allows you to fly and shoot in two different directions, which allows you, a skilled player, to navigate and fly circles around the bosses and other enemies and rack up like insanely skilled shots. Okay, it is so satisfying to play through these levels and see just how high the skill ceiling goes. In a lot of ways, I would argue there is no real skill ceiling because of just how precise everything is and how like unique and intuitive it is. Like, it's just such a phenomenal action game. And the fact that so many people tried to write this off as like a major disaster just goes to show you just how few people played it. Case in point, you know, you'll see some people online saying the game is 3 hours long. Okay, wow. So you played every stage once. So you did not go back and play them again. You did not increase your skills. You did not like appreciate each level for everything it offers. You know, like again, it took me about like 15, 20 hours to just get all the medals in the game, which are all very hard. I used a guide for it. It would have taken me longer otherwise. Like, again, if you're going for the medals, and if you're going for the achievements, if you're going for, like, you know, the secrets, you know, if you're playing arcade mode, like, it's going to take you longer than that. Like, again, like, the entire point of this kind of arcade-style action is to be endlessly replayable. And that's something that Star Fox Zero delivers in spades. However, the modern gaming audience is trained to simply finish a game once and consider it done and, like, over. And I think that, in essence, kind of defines the issue with Star Fox Zero, is that the audience was simply too brain dead to enjoy it. Okay? You're talking about influencers and streamers who wanted content, who wanted NX news, who wanted, like, Nintendo to move on from the Wii U, so they were very anxious to brush Star Fox Zero under the rug and consider it like a failed product, when in actuality, it's probably one of the best reboots Nintendo has ever made. And it's very frustrating to see that, like, so many people are, like, anxious to preserve the hoax, that so many people are anxious to, like, gaslight you into thinking that, like, Nintendo has somehow failed, or that this is, like, some major deal, that this killed the IP, because this has been a narrative that's been persisting for the past decade, is that they straight up killed the Star Fox IP. But even when this came out, Miyamoto was saying that, like, yeah, I'm going to put more energy into bringing Star Fox back. And now we're seeing that with the movie. You know, we saw that with the re-release of Star Fox 2. We've seen that with, the cameo appearance in Starlink. Like, Star Fox has not gone anywhere over the past 10 years, you know, after the reboot. You know, people are even going back and watching the Battle Begins short now and getting invested in it. Like, all that happened is that we're past the point where the damage control put forward by the gaming YouTubers and the influencers and the game journos has been completely forgotten about, and people can now, like, enjoy the game for what it is, which is a masterpiece. And I suppose this goes to show you that, like, we're in this era now where it's going to be pretty much impossible to downplay major Nintendo IPs like we have been traditionally. You know, if something like Star Fox Zero can come back and be a huge success and, like, get people invested in the IP again, it can only be imagined of, like, what Nintendo can do with other brands. You know, Donkey Kong, in a lot of ways, 3D Donkey Kong at least, was in a longer stasis than Star Fox ever was. You know, if you really think about it, if that could come back and have, like, such a huge hit with Bonanza, I don't think it's unreasonable to assume that we are going to get a new Star Fox Zero game on the Switch too, and that's going to be a very, very exciting thing. So, again, we're going to see a lot of people coping and seething about this because, you know, a lot of people's credibility as YouTubers hinges on, like, this IP not doing well. But I think it's safe to say that Fox McCloud is back. Star Fox is like going to be an A-list Nintendo IP again, and there's just nothing you can possibly do to stop it. Star Fox Zero was absolutely a success.